Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast, where I, Anna Woolliscroft, chat with fellow writers and outdoor enthusiasts about how we can embrace creativity and curiosity to live a life full of adventure that doesn't feel like hard work. I delve into exploratory conversations about my two loves in life, writing and nature connection, as part of my mission to share the well-being benefits they both bring. It's wonderful to have you here today. In today's Writing with Purpose podcast, I chat with Jo Plimmer, a health and wellbeing coach who specialises in reducing stress and overcoming the cycles and patterns that lead to burnout. We talk about our stress response system, signs to spot, and how nature can support our wellness journey. Well, hello, Jo Plimmer. Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast. It's fabulous to have you on and see you again.
Lovely to see you too, Anna. Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. So, Jo, you are a life coach and founder of the Wood and the Trees Coaching. And previously you practiced as a neurological physiotherapist. That's a mouthful in itself, isn't it? And you're also well versed in neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP as some people might know it. You're a hypnotherapist and have trained in timeline therapy, life and health coaching. And now you've got a big picture vision that you'd love to create a space and a community where people are living a healthy and happy and a present life, and they're able to take time for themselves and enjoy it. So if we can kick off, if that's okay, what happened that guided you or inspired you to make the switch from working in healthcare to retraining as a life coach?
Yeah, well, so when I was working in the NHS full time as a physiotherapist, and at the same time, I decided that I wanted to take up a new challenge. I wanted to take up something new, and I decided that was going to be triathlon, and I did that. And to cut a long story short, it turned out that I was fairly good at it. And I did my first race. I had to learn to swim. I could swim, crawl, I sort of learnt as a kid. But I didn't really have the technique. I was a gasping heap at the end of the pool after a length, and so I had to learn to swim front crawl. And then I did my first race the following spring, and I came second lady. And so I sort of thought, well, I might have something here. This is worth pursuing. And more importantly, I just absolutely loved it. I was bitten by the bug and wanted to keep doing more and more. And eventually I ended up going on to the next level, the next kind of distance of triathlon. And I ended up qualifying to compete for GB in my age group. And so that sort of then became part of my life as well. And when you're doing triathlon, there are 3 disciplines, obviously. So you swim, bike, run. And so you have to train for each of those 3 disciplines, plus strength and conditioning training, thinking about your nutrition, the transitions from one thing to another. And so actually, that in amongst my full-time job became quite a lot in itself. But then I also, in my wisdom, decided that I was going to set up my own private physio practice. So I worked largely with people following a stroke, and I live in Shropshire, and the services that support those people in Shropshire are limited, and that's the same across the country, to be fair, but particularly limited in Shropshire. And so our team would finish seeing them, and the input would kind of drop off a cliff. And so there were services there, but it was a long wait, or it became a lot less input for them. So I wanted to kind of be able to offer a little bit more of those services to people in Shropshire, but also then it meant that I could potentially drop some of my NHS hours, so I could work more flexibly and then be able to sort of fit in my own sort of training and my own life around work as well. So that all happened, and life just became one conveyor belt of one thing after another. And it was just there were all things that I enjoyed doing, but it became a lot, and I ultimately ended up burning out. And again, to cut a long story short, because it has been a long journey for me to kind of, through all this realization and to where I am now. But I also ended up splitting up from my husband at the time as well. And we'd tried, we'd had some problems previous to that, and we tried to overcome those, but we decided that actually we were better to part ways, and we did that relatively amicably. We'd been together for a long time, and almost we'd kind of grown up together, met when we were in our teens, grown up together, but almost kind of not had the space to grow as individuals, but equally kind of grown as individuals and sort of wasn't quite working together. So anyway, we decided that we were gonna part. But there is still a whole lot of emotion and a lot of things that are going on around that. So there were multiple kind of factors that led to me burning out. And actually, at the time, I didn't even realize that's what it was. I just knew that I didn't feel great. I wasn't really properly happy. I was really struggling to sleep. Sleep was something I struggled with a lot. And so I was exhausted a lot of the time. And, I was somebody that was relatively on the ball normally, but I couldn't think clearly. I had all sorts of kind of, I'm going to say health problems, but when I say that, more like kind of my period stopped, I had digestive issues, those sorts of things. And so at that point, I just thought something's not right here. And I was kind of looking for ways to help myself feel better. And so doing lots of research. And as I did that research, what I found really surprised me. And not because of the information was really well laid out. There was lots of kind of science and evidence behind these things, which is something I love. I like to know why things happen and what's going on. But it surprised me and shocked me because I'd been working in healthcare for 12 years and training and working in healthcare for 15 years by this point, and I didn't already know these things. I knew a lot about the brain and body, but I didn't know these things, and these weren't things that I was talking to my patients about. And ultimately, at the heart of that was that we have our stress response, which we might know as our fight or flight response.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very useful mechanism. It is, in fact, essential for our safety and survival. And it is a completely normal thing to be able to switch on in our body. It gets us out of danger. And then the idea is it should switch off again. And so there are things in our lives, particularly our modern day busy lives, that mean that there is kind of cumulative small doses of stress that keep adding up and adding up and adding up because we are busy and on the go, and we've got things coming at us from all directions, lots of demands, lots of roles that we're playing in our lives. And then also maybe some of these bigger kind of factors like the emotional strain of going through a divorce or things like that. And actually, when this stress response becomes chronically switched on, which means it's switched on for long periods of time without switching off, that's when it can cause problems, not only in terms of your health, so like my problems with my period and my digestive symptoms, but also problems with sleep, problems with performance, so things like your mental performance, your ability to think clearly, your memory, your concentration, all of those things happen, but also your physical performance. And so it was sort of at this point that I thought, I need to, this information should be out there further and wider. And as I spoke to more of my kind of friends and people in my life, I realized just how many people would benefit from really knowing that and understanding that, to be able to overcome the problems that they were facing day to day. And so it was really that point that made me want to change from physio into, and I would probably encompass being, a health and life coach. That's sort of what I trained as, a health and life coach, because I come at it from both the health aspects of sort of stress and burnout, but also that that all comes from our lives. You are one whole person, and you can't determine how that stress response gets switched on. It could be from any different area of your life, and so they combine together really, really nicely.
Yeah, very, very comprehensive answer to the question, Jo. Thank you. And I think as well, you've touched on quite a few things that a lot of people will relate to there, having that burnt out sort of lead up to the burnout, and having the actual burnout, which I've experienced myself as well a couple of times. Fortunately, I was kind of able to spot the signs, but I think you get to a point where you don't spot anything, do you? Because I know I lost a lot of weight. I was just working silly hours. Work was everything. I didn't really have anything outside of work. And then afterwards, when I sort of got myself back together a little bit more, and kind of refocused on the work and that kind of life, hesitate when I say life, work, a life balance, because I think like you know, it's all life, work. If we do work that we enjoy, then it's part of our life, and it's not really that kind of black and white, as it were. But then people said to me afterwards, "Oh, I thought you were getting really thin. You're looking really pale. I was a bit worried about you." Well, why did nobody say anything to me? You always have to come to these realizations yourself, unless something, you know, physically happens to you, or you have a complete breakdown or something like that, I suppose. But also relationship breakups. I experienced that as well. 13 years I was with my partner, and it got to the point where we were more like flatmates. But my approach to that was, oh, this is how life becomes. And I think that's something that we have to try and get over sometimes, that life is so much more, but we just have to, you know, make it that. And finding the information and doing our own research, I think quite often is up to us. I mean, it's, you know, when you say that you worked in the health industry for 13 years with training, 15 years, and a lot of this information wasn't out there, we have to question, why is that information not out there? Is it new information? Is it just something that, you know, the powers that be think it's too technical for people to understand? Or, you know, what's kind of the missing piece? So I think, you know, a lot of people reach a certain point where they find something out for themselves. They've had that lived experience, and this just needs to be shared with everybody so that everybody can benefit. Which sounds as though you got to that point and you thought, this needs to get out there, and I want to work with people so that they can transform their lives. So you developed in your work this concept called the boom bust roller coaster. Could you share a little bit about what that is, and what that entails, and sort of how you came to use that very memorable phrase?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, and the Boom Bust roller coaster is actually something that I almost experienced probably first off in my training, or that's where I really recognised it first of all. So when I was training for my triathlon, and I would have days where everything was going really well. I was, you know, I was getting the paces, I was doing really well. I felt like I had a really good training run or whatever, and I felt like, you know, I was on top of the world. I was winning at life. Everything was great. And then there were other days where I just could not get the pace. I could not make my body do it. I just was feeling sluggish and slow, and just wasn't, you know, my headspace wasn't in it. And nothing had particularly changed from one day to another. And yet I felt so different. What I was experiencing was so different. And my performance was so different. And actually, it's been quite a long journey for me through all of this. And as I've done a lot of my own personal inner work, I really recognised actually you'd have these days in your life too, and I'd recognise them in my training efforts, but we have those days where you know, you are on it from the off, and you get loads done, you're super productive, you're crossing off your to-do list, you're helping lots of people, you're juggling lots of things, and you feel like, you know, yeah, I've got this. And then there are those other days, and inevitably it kind of tips over at some point. So you might have maybe a couple or a few of those days where you're feeling good, but at some point it tips over into feeling overwhelmed, frantically firefighting, struggling to think clearly, you know, rushing from one thing to another, wondering if all this effort that you're putting in is really worth it, because you just don't feel like you're doing any of it right. And so the Boom Bust roller coaster is really a framework that I put together that describes that. And that is sort of in its most basic form is this kind of good days tipping over into the bad days. But what I do, and kind of the sort of work that I've done around it, is looking at actually what is happening in that framework. So in those bad days, we can, you know, we get into those bad days, and they almost start to perpetuate themselves, because maybe you start to feel more tired because you're, you know, you're feeling so overwhelmed with everything, and that's just draining your energy. You haven't got the motivation to do things, and so then you don't get as much done, and then you feel like you're on the back foot even more because you haven't got it all done, and so then you feel like you've got to throw yourself into it, and that, you know, it just kind of self-perpetuates itself. And so it looks, what I do is kind of looking at how we can nip that cycle in the bud. And that's sort of on the, so if you think of the boom bust roller coaster, or the roller coaster, the up bit being the boom days, so the good days, and then the down bit being the bust days. So that's kind of on the down bit side of it. So if we were thinking about it as a picture in front of us, it might be on the right hand side of that. But on the left-hand side of that, there are the things that are actually driving this cycle in the first place. And that might be, so it might be good things that kind of send us in with lots of motivation. We've got high energy, high drive, we're excited about something. We want to kind of put our efforts into something potentially. So it might be something that is good that drives it. But also in there, there's kind of these habits that come up that start to drive this cycle more. So things like overscheduling and being unrealistic with how much that you can actually fit into your time, saying yes to things when you know that you can't really fit things into your time, into your schedule, because you struggle to say no to people. And so kind of the people pleasing element of it. The sort of procrastinating and as I said earlier, you're sort of putting something off or for whatever reason because you're struggling with motivation, but procrastinating. So all there's kind of various different habits that can drive it. But equally, underneath those habits, there are kind of deeper drivers, things that maybe are beliefs or things that are causing this cycle to kind of get set up. And so that might look like things like feeling like you haven't got enough time to fit everything in, or there's not enough money, or something's going to go wrong. The kind of worrying and what ifs, but also the sort of expectations that you might put on yourself. So having unrealistically high expectations of yourself generally. And it might be expectations you feel from other people. Maybe they've come in from other ways in your life, or even kind of societal wide expectations. So this kind of expectation that we have to be on the go all the time to be successful, to be productive, to be worthy of our space in the world. And so that kind of societal pressure can then feed that belief as well. But then there's also things like imposter syndrome and that kind of deep-rooted belief that however much you do and however much you achieve, it's still not going to be good enough. And imposter syndrome kind of plays out in various different ways, but that might look like trying to do everything and not just to a good enough standard, but to an exceptional standard. It might look like needing to know everything before you can get started on something. So there's quite a few different ways that it can kind of come in, but there's a whole variety of things that kind of perpetuate the cycle, but then also things that drive the cycle in the first place. So what I do is really look at how we can address the things that are perpetuating it and nip it in the bud, but then also dig a little bit deeper, find out what the root cause is and sort it out at the root cause, because then that's when the cycle can really change. And it's not just about dealing with it on a surface level problem kind of solution.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. A lot of what you said, I raised my hand at one point when you were talking because it's like, yep, that's me. The people pleasing, not being able to say no to people, and doing something as well. That for me is a massive thing. That the whole kind of imposter syndrome piece about not feeling good enough. And I love learning. I'm constantly learning new things, but I know a lot of the drive for me constantly learning things is that imposter syndrome. Oh, once I learn this, I'll be able to do this. Oh, once I've ticked that box and I've got that certification, then I'll be able to do this. And when I do a lot of courses, pick up a lot of information, but I also know a lot of the stuff that's already there. So it's kind of trusting in yourself that you're good enough already. Sometimes I think is what people need to trust in themselves and say to themselves.
And isn't that, I mean, I think you've picked up on a really interesting point there, because often we know these things and actually you're probably telling other people that they need to do these things or need to, like supporting them in some way. You know the answers, but actually doing them and resolving those problems, because it comes from a much deeper place. We're working with that kind of the subconscious mind, the unconscious mind, which is where the kind of NLP and those tools that I use come in. Because it's so much deeper than that, actually changing it is really a lot more a lot harder than just knowing the information. And
Yeah.
that's where the other kind of side of it comes in, really digging down into those problems that are actually driving it and dealing with those.
Yeah, and it's really easy to see that peaks and troughs of the roller coaster, the boom and the bust, sorry. And yeah, so why are we not getting to that plateau level where everything's more balanced. We don't have the same, there might be the little ups and downs, of course, that is life, isn't it? But not having that constantly going. It's the same as, dieting, I think, for people is a prime example, isn't it? People that lose weight, put on weight, lose weight, put on weight. And it's exactly the same thing can happen with our habits and our behaviours just in life in general. There's what you were saying about the nervous system. I think we don't know enough about that at all. It's almost something that should be in the biology lesson at school so that we can understand and have some of those perhaps feelings in the body that we can look out for, because I think that's another area, isn't it? You touched on sort of the kind of the head and the body, the mental and the physical. They're so interlinked, but we seem to just see them as two completely separate entities that just aren't linked in any way, shape or form. Whereas I think part of my growth in various areas has been paying attention to the body and what's happening, what am I feeling, and then realizing that actually that's a result of something that might have happened from a mental kind of stress origin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely. Yeah, I think you're spot on. And actually, we spend a lot of time living up in our head rather than in our body, don't we? And I think you're right. Knowing this from an early age. And obviously, as I say, I've worked in healthcare for a long time, and it is incredible, really, because every single person has a brain and has a body, but what we know about it is probably a lot less than what we know about a lot of other things in the world. And actually and that's not like, that might be individuals, so when I maybe worked with my stroke patients, for example, there would be stuff that I could explain to them about their body that then would really help to understand how it works and so how they can get the most out of it. But equally, we as a whole race, we're still uncovering so many things about our body and sort of learning to understand it. And what the great thing is that we haven't needed to understand it for all these years necessarily, because actually it's such an incredible invention that it's such an incredible feat of engineering, really, and in many different ways, that it does it all for us. But then it's when things go wrong, isn't it? When it's not doing it for us. And that's sort of really where we have started to explore. And you mentioned earlier about why aren't these things being looked at? Well, probably as we've evolved, we've looked to solve problems. And so the medical model that we have has looked at trying to solve the problems that come up to help us continue to be able to live and be able to function. But actually, what we have is, as we've evolved technologically as well, and the problems that are being created are for very different reasons and very different kind of ways. And so actually, what we are almost we need to address the cause of those problems, and that's almost where this kind of information is coming in. And so it's our medical model, particularly in the Western society, very much looks at dealing with the symptoms and the problems after they have happened, rather than that preventative end. And again, that was another kind of my drivers for coming out of my my job in the NHS and really wanting to work more at the preventative end of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. You talk about our advancement, in particular technological advancement, and a lot of the issues that we have now, the stresses that we have now, weren't around probably as early as maybe 50, 60 years ago. It's since that invention, and life in general has got busier because, we can communicate with people anywhere in the world now. We don't have to, travel very far. And there's this, and that's great. There's great aspects to that. And, how, the time is just sort of compressed in how we can obtain things, information we can find anywhere. But this sort of busyness, it's a busyness really, isn't it? It's constantly on the go. We've kind of lost our way to slow down. And the self-awareness that comes with that, the reflection aspect that comes with that. And I think, it's our, as you say, the Western model of healthcare, but also other aspects of life, particularly in the Western world. We've disconnected from a lot of things that were from how we evolved originally. If I can maybe steer the conversation a little bit to nature now, you've got those beautiful trees in your background, and the coaching name of your business as well. Just we've got to disconnect from nature and being outside. A lot of people live in cities. Everything's 24/7. It's difficult for us to slow down, and I personally have gained a lot from stepping out into nature, more so just going for a walk. I'm a runner, so I've never done a triathlon. I don't think I could do the cycling aspect of that. That's my weak spot. I know my dad never let me have a bike when I was a child, so even now I struggle on a bike. On the flat, going, I'm fine, but stopping and starting, getting on and off, it's a shambles. But getting outside for me really helps me to slow down. I become more present, more mindful, more self-aware, and my senses. I try and pay a lot more attention to my senses, what I can hear, see, smell, and I think that helps us to slow down. So, if I could ask you, Jo, what role does nature play in your life, professionally and personally, and how does nature support well-being?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Yeah, I agree. Nature is such a beautiful, healing presence, and actually, there is a lot of science and kind of evidence behind that too. So you can, and as you sort of described very aptly, you can feel those benefits, can't you? You can really experience those benefits, and if I have. My business is called Wood and the Trees Coaching, and actually that name came from the fact that I often say that we can get bogged down in the details of day-to-day life and we can't see the wood for the trees. And so what I talk about in terms of coaching is that it enables you to be able to step back and see the bigger picture of the wood, but while still being able to navigate the day-to-day details of life, which are the trees. And so Wood and the Trees Coaching fit really nicely for that, but it's also a place that I absolutely love to be. Being in the woods is one of my favorite places to be, and because of it's sort of healing powers, but just because it's so beautiful and it's a really lovely place that I like to be. So I centered my coaching business around that, but also I love to bring it in wherever I can. And so I've done sort of wellness walks and that kind of thing over the time, which is about getting out, getting away from the desk and just being able to break up the day, because actually there aren't just a lot of kind of stress relieving properties of nature. And if I just, I'm probably going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but those stress relieving properties, again, as I say, there's quite a lot of science and evidence behind that, and it's thought that it might be linked to something called fractals in in nature. So fractals are like a geometric pattern, a recurring pattern, basically, and nature is full of these. Naturally, so if you think about like a snowflake or a raindrop or the shapes of leaves, sorry, and those sorts of things, there are lots of recurring patterns there, geometric recurring patterns, and those being exposed to those, it's something to do with our vision and how the fractals in our eyes sort of match the fractals in the nature. I don't know quite the details of all of that, but basically by just being exposed to them, we don't have to do anything, but just being exposed to it, it can reduce stress. It's been shown to reduce stress by about, I think it's up to about 60% in one particular study. And so it helps to bring down those levels, but it also does things like, so in the studies, it's been shown to reduce your blood pressure and improve mood and help reduce anxiety, even to help improve your immune system. So, getting out in nature, there are lots and lots of different benefits, and for lots of different reasons. It's not just related to those fractals. But personally, I think it's also a very mindful space as well. And so it enables you to, you said earlier, you like pick up on your senses a lot more. And actually, if you have ever just sat and watched fire, like, if you've got like a sort of firelight, you're around a bonfire, or we have a fire pit at home, and just to sit and watch that fire, or if you've got like an open fire in your house, watching those flames, it can be a very mindful thing, can't it? I've heard other people say watching fish going around in a tank, really
Yeah.
therapeutic for them. Maybe watching the sea, the waves coming in and out. There is lots and lots of things where we just become very mesmerized by these particular things. And it is a really mindful process. And what we mean by mindful is just being present in that moment. And nature offers these kind of opportunities, this beauty that kind of is really incredible to look at, isn't it? And so it draws us in and offers them. And so for me, it becomes very mindful, but also at the same time, and it kind of depends on what I need, I suppose, when I'm out and about in nature, but it can be very expansive as well. Like it just kind of allows you. If I've been inside too long, I almost feel like I'm
Yeah.
craving to get outside because I sort of feel like I need that expansive nature of it. I need to be out in the open and sort of be able to let go of all that energy maybe that's got pent up inside me, that sort of maybe stressed or anxious energy or whatever it is that I'm holding at the time. But also it really helps me to step back and get perspective, or to allow a flow of ideas to come into my head and to get that inspiration that I need. So there are loads and loads of different benefits, and again there is science behind quite a few of these things as to what's actually happening to cause those benefits that we get. So I find it very, very healing in many ways. So personally, that would be my sort of go-to choice. And I like to be active in nature, but you don't have to be. And if I can't get out, that's where I might try and bring it in. So I might have my screens, my background as the trees. So I'm bringing it in. So I'm still getting the benefits of seeing that nature. Those fractals still work even in a picture. The sounds of the ocean are still going to be able to help with that kind of relaxing mode, even though if you're listening to them on a recording rather than actually in real life. So there's kind of lots of ways that we can bring it in and get those healing effects of nature. And you also mentioned my kind of long-term vision. And that long-term vision involves being kind of a woodland retreat. So it'd be the wood and the trees in real life, if you like. So it's kind of wooden lodges and pods in a woodland environment where it is, you're absolutely right. It's about enabling people to make time for themselves, but to finding the right way to do that for them. But just again, by being in that sort of environment, that woodland environment, it's bringing in all those healing properties at the same time. So it plays a role in my life in quite a number of different ways, really.
Yeah, you've painted a really nice picture there of a sanctuary out in a serene space for people to enjoy. And I think you're absolutely right. There's so many different aspects of nature that we can benefit from, and not everybody is, certain things aren't going to work for some people. You and I are both enjoy more of probably the extremer aspect of exercise, and running in nature, swimming, wild swimming, something that I've tried more recently and enjoyed. But it could just be as simple as going and sitting on a bench in a sunny patch. It could be in your garden. It doesn't have to be in a local park or a woodland area, because some of these spaces aren't that accessible for people. But there are so many benefits. And I think the fractals that you mentioned, and I've come across that a few times, and there's also the aspect that if you notice something that it doesn't conform to that pattern, then it, way back when we used to live in the woods, that was potentially, showing us a danger, or something wasn't quite right. So coming back to that sort of fight or flight stage. And also I think when you were talking about the fire, is that we don't have a fire here since I moved in with my partner, and I had a log burner at my house. My parents had a coal fire, an open coal fire. And you're absolutely right. It is mesmerizing. All of these aspects of nature, these natural aspects that just happen, are very mesmerizing. And I wonder if that is the biophilia concept, where we are innately connected to nature, because that's where we've come from, and whether something deep within us has flicked the switch on when we're looking at fire, or when we're listening to the waves, or some of those aspects, that actually, yes, there is that connection there. And how the mesmerizing aspect does help you to feel mindful, and it helps you to slow down, and it helps you to feel relaxed. And for anybody, that is a great thing to happen.
Definitely, yeah, and yeah, I think I haven't come across information kind of saying that that's what it's related to, but I think that is where we came from, and we're surrounded by nature. If we go back
Mm.
to our sort of ancestors, it was very much about that, and it's us that has brought in the man-made things. And like you said earlier, there is some amazing qualities in that, and it gives us a lot of things, but actually we can then move away from things that are actually really beneficial to us in other ways, and where we get, there was a lot of sort of natural healing properties of the ways that we used to do things. And something I didn't mention was it you were saying is kind of we've changed. Also our exposure to light has changed a lot over the years, whereas we would have spent days outside in bright lights, and sort of in that natural daylight, and then our evenings would have been lit by firelight or candles, or it would have been a much dimmer type of light. Now it is that we spend a lot of time in the day indoors in artificially lit rooms, which are, in terms of the light intensity, is much less than being in natural daylight, particularly if it's on a sunny day. And then our evenings are lit by artificial lights again. We put on those bright lights. We have those screens in our faces, which are giving off a really bright light. And so our circadian rhythm is set by, or one of the things that can be very beneficial in helping to keep that rhythm is daylight exposure. It's the most reliably recurring sort of pattern activity, and so that becomes the thing that it is most dependent on. There are other things that can help to support your circadian rhythm, but then if we've changed that way of lighting our lives, then actually that can change our circadian rhythm, and that can bring in the problems with sleep quality and being able to sleep or not be able to sleep. So again, just getting outside from that point of view can be very, very beneficial. And as you said, it could be as simple as going to step outside into your garden and just have a few minutes out there. One thing I used to do when I maybe was struggling I'm a bit of an overthinker. That would sort of be, my head would go into that space. And if I just need to, if I've got like a head that's heavy with thoughts, going outside and just being able to listen for the furthest away sound that I could hear, it really challenges me to tune into something, because sometimes I find it maybe a bit more difficult to just be mindful, to, take in the sights and the sounds. But if I give myself a bit of a task to do, then it helps me to tune into it. So just doing that could then be able to help switch off that overthinking, which in turn brings me down out of stress response, out of that fight or flight response, and helps to calm my nervous system, which in doing so then allows the clarity of thought to come back in and to be able to feel like I'm on a much better place. So I can use it quite strategically, which is where I kind of come at these things from, trying to use these things strategically to be able to get the best out of yourself. And earlier you mentioned kind of getting, rather than the boom bust roller coaster, getting back to that plateau.
Mm.
Actually, I don't see it so much as a plateau, but more of a steady sort of up and down, but one that we can manage, that we can sort of work to be able to get the best out of ourselves, because actually we are capable of really incredible things. As I said earlier, the human brain and body are designed to do amazing things, and we are capable of a huge amount. But it becomes problematic when we almost are too much pushing that side of things, and we don't allow our body to do what it needs to do in the background to keep us on that path. So I talk about kind of switching off to be able to switch on. So
Mm.
your ups and downs are still there, but they're not these kind of huge peaks and troughs that you're not in control of. Instead, you're using the tools and techniques that you've got to be able to switch off your stress response, so that then you can switch on your clarity and your inspiration and your concentration and your problem solving skills and your decision making and all of those things, all of those things that we need to be able to thrive, come on when we are in that good place, not in that stressed
Mm.
kind of fight or flight, I'm in danger, I need to just fight for my life kind of place. We are not at our best when we are there. Yes, it will keep us safe and alive, but long term we will not be able to function at our best.
Yeah, and I guess when you are in that kind of stressful situation, there's other things going on in the body that perhaps aren't happening in the way that they should do, which then impacts, the physical aspect. But I love that exercise that you mentioned at the start of the when you were describing that, of just going outside and listening for the furthest sound in the distance. I quite like that. I think I might try that, because sometimes I get to certain points in the day, and it's usually those days when I know I've got a lot on and I haven't been outside at all, haven't been out for a walk. So I think just taking a couple of minutes, leaving whatever is on the desk and going outside and just listening would be a really nice way to kind of just ground ourselves and come back to a bit of reality and a bit of sanity and something to focus on. And while you were talking, it reminded me of, I went on a walk for the summer solstice, and there was a sleep expert there. And she was saying that if you can, one of the first things to do when you wake up in the morning is just look outside or go outside and just get a couple of minutes of that natural daylight, which comes into what you were saying about, our circadian rhythm. Did I say that right? I never know if I say that word right. That just helps to sort of kickstart it there. And she also says that, our bodies have a lot of other clocks as well, our bowels, and, a heart. We've got other clocks in there, which if you work in shifts, air flight crew, for example, you're up and down all the time, aren't you? I can see why certain careers aren't lifetime careers, because you can't cope with that ongoing constant stresses. So in the past you've run the pop-up wellness festivals, and that's how we first met. I attended one of yours, which was more geared towards the business community. You had business focus in the morning, and then relaxation and mindfulness in the afternoon, and then also there was a focus on women and kind of women's I don't want to say issues, but menopause, relaxation, and both of those were fantastic events. So I wonder, how have you found those, and is that something that you're going to be doing in 2005, and what's for you next, shall we say, to kind of encompass all of that?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Yeah. So the pop-up wellness festivals really came from, because I had this big vision of this woodland wellness venue where there are lots of different people doing lots of different things, because there is no one right way to do health and well-being. And if you a bit like if you're a member of a gym and there's a gym class timetable, you can sort of pick and choose the ones that suit you. Well, it's like that, but on much broader health and well-being. So from the personal development side of things to the spiritual side of things to the fitness and nutrition side of things, and all of those are going to support our health and well-being in one way or another. But what is right for you at any one time might be very different from what somebody else needs at one time, or what you need at another time. So it's about facilitating that, really. So the pop-up wellness festivals were almost a test of that concept, and that's where they came from. It was about, I did some market research about the theory of the concept and got good response from that. Then went on to do the pop-up wellness festivals to see if actually they worked in reality, or that concept worked in reality. And yeah, they've been great events. They've been absolutely amazing. And I've learned a lot from each one. So the first one was like a general one. The second one was kind of mixing business and wellness, to sort of bring those two things in. So there's kind of the business growth and networking aspect in the morning, and then the sort of health and wellbeing aspect in the afternoon. And each of them, there's been multiple things going on at each kind of time slot, and you make your day to suit you. You pick and choose the one that suits you. And then finally, as you say, the last one was around kind of any of the challenges that a woman might come up against in her life, and sort of a whole variety of different things at different stages of life. And so it's been about experimenting with ideas and concepts and trying to find out more about that. And I certainly have found out a lot. I've also found out how much work it is to put one of those together. And so I have, as well as my business, I have a part-time job as well. And so when I have one of those that I'm working towards, it makes life extremely busy again. And I have to be really careful myself, because I'm passionate about a lot of things, and I like to put my energy into these things, and I like to do them. But I have to be careful about my own well-being, my family life, and making sure that I'm present in my family as well, and getting a balance that I didn't didn't have at one point in my life, and sort of maintaining it so that I feel that I can give to and get from a whole variety of different things in my life. And that's really important to me. So yes, the intention is I will probably do one or two in 2025. But it will, I just need to, I haven't quite worked out what the model is going to be and how that's going to look. And there's been lots of feedback from the events that I've done so far. What has come out of it is this kind of the overarching message of those events was make time for you. That was kind of my real key theme, and something that I am, again, incredibly passionate about spreading that message with. And so what I've done since the ones that I've done this year is to really work on how I can spread that message and get it out there to more people, because I've worked with one-to-one with my clients in sort of what I've done in the past, but that isn't necessarily accessible for other people. And some of the services that I've provided previously, I work with busy people, and they haven't necessarily been as accessible as I would like them to be to that group of people. So the Make Time for You message, I've been trying to get out there through, I've launched a podcast. I've got a membership that is kind of on an app, so that you kind of, it looks at working with people who struggle to make time for themselves, but doing that in bite-sized content and in an accessible way, so that it means that you can get what you need when you need it, and then also getting out to talk to kind of workplaces and sort of try and support workplaces in terms of their making time for themselves, and not just for their health and happiness and well-being, but because also actually it enables you to perform at your best, to feel and be at your best. And so that's sort of where my efforts and time is going to be spent over the coming months and into 2025.
Yeah, congratulations on the podcast, because I think that's relatively new for you, isn't it? You've done about 9 episodes, I think, now.
That's right, yeah.
And people can start from start from the start and listen to that foundation that you've been creating, and some of the stuff that you've touched on today, how people can help to carve out that time for themselves, and the aspects that they need to think of. So yeah, congratulations. And the membership app that you mentioned is on Patreon. So that again is very accessible for people. It's similar to Substack, isn't it? I think.
I don't know Substack actually, so I'm not sure.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So I've know more of Substack than Patreon, but there's various levels that
That's
people
right.
can have a certain amount of content for free, and then donate a certain amount per month, or on an ad hoc or an annual basis to access more in-depth content. So that's a great way to go, and I think that's what a lot of people, independent entrepreneurs, sole traders, are doing now to make it more accessible for people, because not everybody can turn up into a room in a particular city or town to be able to embrace what it is that they want to learn. So congratulations on those.
Thank you.
So how can people best reach you, Jo? I know that you've got the website. There's some information that you want to tweak on there. So what's the best place for people to learn more?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so my website is there, which is Watt Coaching, WATT coaching.co.uk. But as you say, it's, in with all these changes that have been going on, I just haven't had the chance to get that up to date and up to speed, but hopefully it will be in the next few months. But yeah, so the podcast is the Make Time for You podcast, and it's on all the major podcast platforms. So if you search Make Time for You with Jo Plimmer, you'll be able to find it. As you say, the membership is on Patreon, which is patreon.com, and it's /make time for you is the sort of the membership site. And then I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. So on LinkedIn, I am at Jo Plimmer, and on Facebook and Instagram, I am at Wood and the Trees Coaching.
Brilliant. So we'll include all those links in the show notes so that people can just click a link and easily access you.
Amazing, thank you.
And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. We met earlier on this year, I think, wasn't it? And I always learn something from you whenever I meet you. So thank you very much. Is there anything else that you want to share, to mention before we wrap up?
I mean, I think we've covered a huge amount of stuff, haven't we? So thank you for having me on, is I think the biggest thing that I want to say. It's been a real pleasure. And as you say, yeah, it's been lovely getting to know you and sort of meeting earlier in the year and sort of developing that relationship more. So thank you. But also, I suppose my parting message would be to make time for you, because it is just so vital in every aspect of your life. And I know it gets talked about a lot in terms of, you know, you're not being able to pour from an empty cup and those kinds of things. And we can say all those terms, but actually doing it isn't always easy. And it's about finding that way that's going to work for you to be able to be at your best and feel like your best.
It is, definitely. And certainly I've been slowing down a little bit more every year for the last 5 years, really. And I'm finally in a place now where I feel as though I've got a good kind of balance of everything. I enjoy the majority of what I do from a work perspective. I'm always looking for new adventures outdoors and from a learning perspective. And until you start to make changes, and they can be very small changes to begin with, you just don't realise what a difference it makes in you as a person. So thank you very much for highlighting a lot of those areas where people can make a start, some of the issues that people can be aware of, and yeah, let's get people to pay more attention and make more time for themselves.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's Writing with Purpose podcast. Having conversations with fellow writers or adventure enthusiasts brings two of my biggest loves in life together, writing and nature connection. I've been a copywriter and content creator for 23 years, but my passion is writing for well-being, and I'm on a mission to share the benefits that putting pen to paper has for personal wellness with as many people as possible. If you want to learn more about writing for your well-being and journaling techniques, please connect with me in my Facebook group, Journaling with Anna.